Are you really going to wear that to her wedding? The question hung heavy in the air, sharp and mocking, but I didn't flinch, didn't turn, just stared at my reflection in the mirror, at the white dress smooth and cool against my skin, lace trailing soft and whispering around my legs. The veil draped over my shoulders, delicate and pale, caught the light like frost. My best friend shifted behind me, eyes wide and worried, hands twisting in her skirt. "This is crazy!" she hissed, voice cracking. "You don't have to do this! God, you shouldn't do this!" But my fingers were steady when I picked up the bouquet. Roses dark and blood red, petals soft and cool and trembling. My breath was even, pulse a dull roar behind my ears, chest tight but calm. "They deserve it," I said, voice smooth and cold, eyes fixed on the mirror, on the curve of my shoulders, the white of the dress, the way the lace caught the light. "Both of them!" The door creaked open behind me, soft and careful, my mother's face pale and drawn in the dim light. Her eyes flickered fast. Dress, veil, bouquet, breath hitching sharp and shallow. "What are you doing?" she whispered, voice splintering, eyes wide and glossy. "Please, this is your sister's wedding. You can't—" "She's not my sister," I snapped, voice low and lethal, fingers flexing tight around the bouquet. "Not after what she did." The silence that followed was thick and bitter, my mother's breath coming fast and broken, hands trembling, eyes rimmed red. For a moment she just stared, lips parted, eyes flickering, throat bobbing with words that never came. But I didn't wait. I swept past her, lace trailing, veil whispering, heels clicking sharp and deliberate against marble. The hallway stretched long and empty, chandeliers flickering, light cold and pale. My breath was even, chest tight but steady, fingers flexing slow and careful, because I wasn't here to beg, wasn't here to forgive. I was here to burn everything down. Betrayal doesn't happen overnight. It starts with small things, the kind that make you pause for half a second, brush it off, and convince yourself you're just overthinking. Maybe he forgot to kiss me goodbye that morning. Maybe he was just tired when he barely looked up from his phone while I talked. Maybe my sister had always been that affectionate, and I was only now noticing. But looking back, I realized it started long before I caught them. It was in the way Jacob's eyes flickered too quickly when she walked into the room, the way his voice softened just a little too much when he said her name, the way my sister Emily always found a reason to be around whenever we had plans, her laughter a little too bright, her gaze lingering on him just a little too long. I should have trusted my gut when I noticed how Jacob started confiding in Emily more than me. At first it was innocent, talking about work stress, bouncing ideas off of her, but then it became something else. I'd walk into a room and they'd stop talking too abruptly. Their conversations became inside jokes I wasn't a part of. When I asked what was so funny, my sister would just smirk and say, "Oh, nothing. Just something stupid Jacob said." From just friends to something more. It escalated subtly. At first it was convenient. Emily and I were close, so naturally Jacob and Emily became friends too. She gave him advice about how to handle my moods, as she called them, laughed at all his jokes, ones I'd heard 100 times before and stopped finding funny. Then came the late-night texts. I noticed his phone lighting up at odd hours. When I asked who it was, he'd shrug and mumble something about work. But one night, curiosity got the better of me. He was asleep beside me, his phone buzzing on the nightstand. I hesitated before picking it up, heart pounding, hands trembling as I swiped the screen, and there it was, Emily's name at the top. "I miss you already. Today was... Wow, I can't believe we have to wait until Saturday to see each other again. I know. I wanted to kiss you so badly if only she wasn't there." My stomach dropped. The room blurred, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. My sister, my fiancé, my blood, my future, my betrayal. The confrontation that never happened. I should have woken him up right then. Should have thrown the phone at his face, screamed, demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I lay there, my chest hollow, my mind racing. I needed to be sure, so I did something I never thought I'd do. The next morning I played dumb. I kissed Jacob goodbye, waved at Emily when she came over to borrow something from my closet. Then I followed her when she left. I stayed 2 cars behind, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I watched her pull into a cafe, one we used to go to together. Then Jacob walked in, and everything inside me shattered. He leaned down to kiss her cheek before sliding into the booth. They held hands across the table. He looked at her the way he used to look at me, and worst of all, she looked at him like he was hers. The hardest part wasn't catching them. It was realizing my family never truly believed I was the one meant to marry Jacob in the first place. I stormed into my parents' house that night, my hands shaking, my voice breaking as I spilled everything. Every disgusting detail about the texts, the secret meetings, the way Jacob looked at Emily like she was the love of his life while I was just a placeholder. I expected shock, outrage, anger on my behalf. What I got was a deep sigh. "Sweetheart, these things happen," my mother murmured, rubbing her temples like my pain was just a mild inconvenience. I stared at her, my stomach twisting. "These things happen? You're seriously saying that after what they did to me?" She gave me a sympathetic smile, one of those "you just don't understand how the world works" looks. "Jacob is a man with ambition, honey. And Emily? Well, she knows how to be the kind of wife a man like him needs." Something inside me went cold. "And I don't?" My mother sighed again. "You've always been so independent, sweetheart. You focus on your career, you speak your mind, you don't bend the way a wife sometimes needs to. Emily? She understands the sacrifices that come with marriage." I felt like I was going to be sick. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You think I should just accept that my fiancé cheated on me with my own sister because she's a better fit for him?" "It's not about who's better or worse," she soothed. "It's about what makes sense." And, well, they make sense. And just like that, it all became clear. I was never the daughter my parents put their hopes on. Emily was. She was the perfect one, the softer one, the one who played by the rules, who never rocked the boat. Me? I had opinions, I challenged things. I had a career, a life outside of playing house. And to them, that made me less worthy of being Jacob's wife. Then came the final blow. "The wedding is happening, sweetheart," my mother said carefully, like she was treading on fragile ice. "We wanted to tell you sooner, but we didn't want to hurt you." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh, how thoughtful of you." My father, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. "We just need you to be mature about this. What's done is done. Causing a scene will only make things harder for everyone." "For everyone," I echoed. "Or just for you?" Neither of them answered. Then my mother reached out, placing a gentle hand on mine, her eyes pleading. "Please, honey, just let it go, for the sake of the family, for Emily." I slowly pulled my hand away. "You want me to let it go?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. I smiled, small, cold, sharp. "Don't worry, Mom, I'm not going to cause a scene." Relief flooded her face. "Oh, thank you, sweetheart. I knew you'd understand. But I promise you one thing," I cut her off, standing up, straightening my shoulders, my heart pounding with something steadier than rage, something calculated. "That wedding? No one is going to forget it." And that was the moment I made my decision. If they wanted a perfect, beautiful, drama-free wedding, then they should have thought twice before betraying me. Because I wasn't just going to sit back and watch them play happy couple. I was going to make sure their world crumbled right in front of them. Weddings are supposed to be joyful, a celebration of love, loyalty, and commitment. But this was a funeral, a slow, painful burial of lies, deceit, and betrayal. And I was the one holding the shovel. I didn't sneak into the ceremony. I walked in, bold and deliberate, and I did it in white. The second my heels clicked against the marble floor, the whispers started. "Is that her? Oh my God, is she actually wearing a white dress? This is going to be a disaster." I ignored them. I had one goal, and I was about to accomplish it spectacularly. Jacob was standing at the altar, chatting with his groomsmen, his back to me. He hadn't seen me yet. But my dear sister, Emily? Oh, she saw me. She was halfway down the aisle, bouquet in hand, when her eyes met mine. I watched her face go pale. Her breath hitched, fingers tightening around the flowers as if that would stop what was coming. I smiled. The officiant, completely oblivious to the chaos brewing, began speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today." I stepped forward. "Wait." The word rang through the air, cutting off the ceremony like a knife. Every head in the room turned toward me. The murmurs spread like wildfire. Jacob's back stiffened. He turned, confusion flickering across his face. Then panic. What are you doing? Emily hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. I tilted my head. Oh, don't mind me. I'm just here to make sure you two start this marriage with full honesty. Jacob moved toward me, his jaw clenched, voice low. Leave. Now. I smiled sweetly. Why? Afraid I'll ruin the moment? Then I pulled the flash drive from my clutch and held it up. Mike, I called out to the groomsman handling the tech. Be a dear and play this real quick. He hesitated. Jacob's face turned to stone. If you do this, I swear... Or what? I interrupted. You'll cheat on me again. Oh wait, you already did that. Gasps echoed through the room. Mike, looking both terrified and intrigued, finally shrugged and pressed play. And the moment the screen lit up, the wedding crumbled. The ultimate exposure. At first it was just texts, large, bold, and impossible to misinterpret. Jacob, I can't wait to see you tonight. She has no idea. Emily, I love sneaking around. It makes it so much hotter. Jacob, after the wedding, she's out of our lives for good. It's just you and me, babe. The ballroom was silent. Then came the first gasp, then another. People started whispering. A woman in the front row clutched her pearls like she was about to faint. A groomsman muttered, "Oh, damn." But I wasn't done. The pictures appeared next. Jacob and Emily at dimly lit restaurants in his car late at night, walking into a hotel together. Then came the final, most damning message. Emily, she was always second best. You were meant to be mine. Gas turned into outright shock. A distant aunt clutched her chest like she'd been personally attacked. The best man mouthed, "Holy shit." My father buried his face in his hands. Jacob? He turned ghostly white, his mouth opening and closing, no words coming out. Emily staggered back, her bouquet slipping from her fingers, her breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. "Turn it off!" she shrieked. "Turn it off right now!" But the damage was done. I turned to my parents, who looked absolutely mortified. "Still think she deserves him more than I do?" I asked coolly. My mother was speechless, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. My father just sat there, his face unreadable. And then the crowd erupted. A distant cousin whispered to her husband, "Oh my God, this is better than reality TV." An uncle shook his head in disgust. "Shameless, absolutely shameless." The mother of the groom stood up and glared at Emily. "You were sleeping with my son while he was engaged? And you thought I'd be happy to welcome you into this family?" Emily turned red. I didn't mean... Oh, please. I cut her off. You meant every single word. Her lips trembled. This isn't fair. I laughed. You know what else wasn't fair? You sneaking around with my fiancé for 2 years. But here we are. Jacob finally found his voice. I can explain. I held up a hand. Oh, I'm sure you can. But you won't be explaining it to me. You'll be explaining it to all the guests who just realized they wasted their time attending a fake wedding. Murmurs turned into chaos. People stood up, shaking their heads, grabbing their coats. "I'm not staying for this," someone muttered. "What a disgrace," another said. "Do we still get to eat?" Someone in the back whispered, earning a sharp elbow from his wife. The pastor sighed, closing his book. "Well, I suppose we won't be needing these vows, then." Jacob clenched his fists. "You just couldn't let it go, could you?" I tilted my head. "Oh, Jacob, you should have known better. I never go down without a fight." The moment the last text faded from the screen, the wedding was over. Silence settled over the ballroom like a heavy fog. My mother sat frozen, her carefully curated image of a perfect family shattered in front of hundreds of witnesses. My father, usually so composed, looked at Emily with pure disappointment. "You are no daughter of mine," he said coldly. Emily gasped, her bouquet slipping from her fingers. "Dad, please." "Get out," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Gas rippled through the guests. Her bridesmaids, once so eager to celebrate her, now stood in stunned disbelief. "She lied to all of us," one of them whispered. "And she had the nerve to act like she was the victim?" Jacob, still frozen at the altar, looked around desperately. His groomsman refused to meet his gaze. His own mother stood up and shook her head. "You are not the son I raised," she muttered before walking out. Jacob turned to me, eyes pleading. I, I can explain. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. "You don't need to. Everyone already saw enough." Emily finally snapped, turning on me with furious tears in her eyes. "You ruined everything!" I tilted my head. "No, you did." And then, just like that, she ran. Out of the ballroom, out of her own wedding, out of the future she thought she had secured. Jacob hesitated for only a second before chasing after her, but the damage was done. The room remained still for a moment. Then someone started clapping. A slow, amused applause. "Damn," a distant cousin muttered. "That was better than TV." Laughter followed. People started murmuring, shaking their heads, grabbing their coats. The wedding was over, and no one cared to stay. I turned to my mother. She just stared at me, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. "You planned this," she whispered. I smiled. "And you still thought I wouldn't go through with it?" She had no answer. I grabbed a champagne glass from a passing server, raised it high, and smirked at the crowd. Since the happy couple is no longer here, let's toast to something else. A voice called out, "To what?" I grinned. "To karma." The guests laughed and raised their glasses, and with that, I turned on my heel, walked out of that disaster of a wedding, and never looked back. A month later, I packed my bags and left town. No dramatic goodbyes, no second-guessing. I built a new life, one where I wasn't just someone's daughter or someone's fiancé. I was me, free and thriving. Meanwhile, my parents couldn't escape the shame. The whispers followed them everywhere. Their perfect reputation, gone. Their social circle, vanished. Even their neighbors kept their distance. Emily and Jacob didn't last long. A relationship built on betrayal never does. One day I got a text from an unknown number. I made a mistake. I didn't reply. I just smiled, set my phone down, and enjoyed the fresh air outside my new apartment, because for the first time in a long time, I was truly, blissfully free. Betrayal is a bitter pill to swallow, especially when it comes from those you trust the most. It's easy to believe that family will always have your back, that love is built on loyalty, that the people closest to you would never intentionally hurt you. But sometimes, the harshest truths come from the ones you least expect. What happened to me wasn't just about a cheating fiancé. It wasn't just about a sister who coveted what wasn't hers. It was about realizing that not everyone in your life wants the best for you. Sometimes, they want what's yours. And when that truth is laid bare, you're left with two choices: become a victim or take control. I chose the latter. It would have been easy to let them win, to let my family convince me that I should step aside, to let Jacob and Emily pretend they had done nothing wrong, to disappear quietly and let them rewrite the story in their favor. But why should I have to be the one to shrink? Why should I be the one to carry the weight of their betrayal while they walked away unscathed? They deserved the fallout. They deserved to have their reputations tarnished, to face the consequences of their choices. Betrayal comes with a price, and they paid it in full. But here's the thing about revenge. It's satisfying, but it's not what truly sets you free. Walking away, starting over, building a life that they could never touch, that was real freedom. Because the truth is, karma works whether you witness it or not. I didn't need to see Emily and Jacob's relationship crumble. I knew it would. I didn't need to watch my parents struggle under the weight of their own shame. Life had already taken care of that. Some wounds don't heal overnight, but they do heal. And the best revenge? It's not watching them suffer. It's thriving while they fade into irrelevance. So if you ever find yourself in